Hey, this is Brother Jeff. I want to show you how to actually use the GreenSock animation JavaScript library inside of Lectora. Now, it's not included by default, but if you actually download GreenSock, it allows you to go beyond the typical animations that you have inside of Lectora. So let's take a look at this example. You see things flying in, bouncing in, rotating at the same time. You can have things change alpha and do different things like that. Now, if you really want to see what GreenSock can do, you first of all go to greensock.com, and let's go ahead and just even in the preview here, you'll notice you can have different timelines, different things happen at the end of different points, and this will just give you a good idea of the types of things that you can do inside of Lectora just by incorporating the GreenSock animations. So what I want to do is I want to come in and first of all download GreenSock, and you do that on greensock.com just by clicking on Get GSAP over on the left hand side, and this will give you the option to download the JavaScript. It'll give you the option to download the ActionScript 3 or ActionScript 2. Now, since Lectora is HTML, we're just going to worry about the JavaScript. So I'm going to click on JavaScript here and then download zip. And this will download to my download section, or it will download to my desktop, wherever my browser has for my default downloads there. Now, if I wanted to if I want to see the types of things that I can use inside of GreenSock, it's while you're here on greensock.com, over under the HTML5 JS file, if you scroll down or just come down to getting started with GSAP, this will give you an introduction, loading files, basic tweening, and it gives you some code on how to actually start basic or start tweening and start looking at different things you can do. Or what I like to do is if there's this jumpstart file. If you click on back on the getting started basics, if I click on check out the jumpstart for GSAP, this will actually load a project file or a sample file, and it will give you the code as you go through this. If I go through next here, it gives you the code on how to start first of all loading in your projects, but then also how to start doing some simple tweening. And so let's first of all, we've downloaded the HTML file, and the only file that I need to actually worry about is when this folder downloads in the source. You can do minified or uncompressed. I'm going to stick with minified. The only file right now that I'm going to load is this tweenmax.min.js file. This is, if by just incorporating this inside of Lectora, will allow me to do some really awesome stuff inside of Lectora. So I'm first of all going to go ahead and load that inside of Lectora. So in Lectora, I have a sample project that I've created. It just has a sample title, and it just has one page for now. What I want to do when I'm loading in an external file is I want to come into the Insert tab, and then on the title level, I'm going to make sure that I select title level. I'm going to go ahead and come over to the HTML extension. Now, even though it's not really going to be an HTML extension, that's what I want to import to begin with. So with that selected, I'm going to come over to Properties, and then under the HTML extension part here, under the type, I'm actually going to select this to be a header scripting. That means on the header of the HTML, this is going to load in, so I can then use this on any page that I may be at inside of Lectora here. And then right under the type, I'm going to select the file and click on Browse for File. Now I'm going to go ahead and find that GreenSock Tween Max JavaScript, and that's within my GreenSock folder that got downloaded, the minified folder, and I'm just going to stick with Tween Max. You can do Tween Lite if you're just going to do basic animations, but Tween Max will basically incorporate the Tween Lite to a timeline light and everything if you wanted to get more into it. There is a lot that you can do. So now that that's loaded, now I can go ahead and apply the GreenSock code to any object on my stage. Now, first of all, I have to have an object somewhere. So I'm going to go ahead and insert. Let's just go ahead and insert a text field. So I'm going to come in, let's go into Home, and then come into Page. Actually, no, go into Insert, and then go into Text block. And let's add some text. This is a sample text, and there we go. Now, one thing that you have to do with GreenSock is you actually have to refer to that object. And in this line of code where it says Tween Lite, which in our case would be Tween Max, and then dot to, and then we have to refer to what object we're talking about. Let's just go ahead and copy that, and let's come into Lectora, and we're going to run a JavaScript file as soon as this page loads. So I'm going to come into Insert, and I'm going to go into Action, and then on Action with the page selected, I'm going to make sure that it's on Show. We're going to run an action, and the action is going to be it's going to be a JavaScript or run JavaScript right there. And now I have this window. If I expand it out, all I have to do is paste in that that file, and I'm going to change the Tween Light to Tween Max. And still, the rest of the code is exactly the same, but that's all I have to do here. Now you notice a couple things. We have to first of all reference the file or the object on the stage that we want to animate. They just have a simple logo here, but our text is going to be something different. So I'm going to select that text, and then under the properties within that text, I'm going to select on this little expand button. This expand button will give me an HTML name, and this is where I can go in and copy that, and that's how I reference that object on the stage. So going back into my JavaScript action here, expanding back this back out, I'm going to go ahead and replace where it says logo and paste in that text 42. I don't have any control over renaming that inside of Lectora, and so you just basically, I found that it's best if you write it down what object is on what, especially if you're working with like one that has multiple objects like this, and you're going to have to animate in each of those at separate times. But here, the next thing is after a comma is a 1, and that's how many seconds this is going to take. And then within curly brackets, you can then start adding your attributes. And this is what is going to animate. So you can see the first thing is left. That means it's going to animate to the left of 632 pixels. So wherever it's at, because we have the word coming back into here, the JavaScript, because we have the word to begin with, it's going to take it from where it currently is and then animate it to that point. Now you can change this to from, which means that it's going to animate from 632 pixels to the current point that it's at right now. So depending on how you want to run that here. But in this case, I'm going to leave it at that, Tween Max, left 632 pixels, and click OK. Now if I hit save and preview, now, one thing I failed to mention or failed to do is on that JavaScript, so let's go back into the properties of the JavaScript. Let's expand this out. The text 42 actually has to be within quotes. So I'm going to add quotes, and then I actually have to have a pound sign in front of it because it's an attribute here, so we're going to access that. So we have text 42 within quotes and then the pound sign in front. So now let's go ahead and hit save and preview. And you notice there we go, it automatically animated for me. Well, that's pretty simple. You can do that inside of Lectora. That's really not that big of a deal. If you come in here into the action and then you click on, or if you come into the animates and animate an object or animates or fade it in or transition it in, transition it out, those are the types of things that you can automatically do. But GreenSock allows you to go beyond that, because if we come back into this little walkthrough here, we can then see exactly what other stuff we can do. We can add on additional stuff like easing. So in this case, I'm going to copy in the easing, which is all we have to do is after the left, add a comma, and then add the easing. So I'm going to copy that, come into my JavaScript, and then right after my left, right after the quotes, I'm going to enter a comma and then paste in the easing there. And now if I preview this, you can see that it added a little bit bounce. Now, Lectora does easing as well, but there is a lot more easing that you can do. If you select this drop-down box, there's a lot more easing that you can do. So it goes beyond the functionality as far as that goes. And you can change the duration, you can change other things right inside of here. Now, the next thing that you want that is possible is to add a delay. So instead of the easing, or even after that, I can add a delay if I want it to happen after a second. Coming back into this example, you notice one thing happens after the other because other stuff is delayed. And so I'm going to come back into Lectora, go ahead and go into my properties of this action, and then after the easing, I'm going to add a comma and then copy and paste in that delay colon 1. And that way it's going to delay a second, and that 1 is a second, and it's going to delay a second before it actually does the animations. Well, let's go ahead and see what else you can do with GreenSock here. And if I click next, now I can actually tween other properties like background color, border bottom color, and then other types of colors. And so you see here in this example, if I hit this tween, you can see that it changes colors. So if I wanted to add the background color and other elements, I can do that as well. I'm going to skip that one for a second, but now I can change the opacity. So if I wanted the opacity to happen, I want it to fade to 0, and it goes from 0 is the totally transparent, and 1 is 100% transparent. So you don't type in 100 or 80 or anything like that. It's either 1 or 0.5, or if you want it to be 50%, it would be 0.5. So let's come back into here, select this JavaScript, come into my properties, make sure the JavaScript is selected there, and now let's add another element to it. You can just keep adding elements to this, and we're going to say opacity colon 1. Actually, no, let's go 0.5. It's going to do 50% of what it currently is. And I haven't tried this on text. I know it works on shapes and images, but let's see if it will try. Yep. So you can see that the fade, that text file has faded out to be 50%, and I can have it fade out. I can have it fade out automatically as well if I want it to, or all the way. So let's go ahead to the next object. You'll see that we can increase if you add a plus and an equal sign in front of the px file. This will take it from wherever it currently is at, and so it doesn't have to go to that. It just adds on its current value. Even if it's at already 100 pixels, it'll add on 100 more pixels to its current value. So wherever it's at, it'll just add that on. If you add a plus and a minus, or plus and an equals, or the minus and equals, will actually take it from where it's currently at and move it away from that by 100 pixels. So another couple other things is you can do this all in multiple files as well. So if you put it within brackets, you can have multiple objects actually animate at the same time. One other thing is you can have it scale. So if you do scale, let's go ahead and come into our object here, go into properties, make sure we have our JavaScript selected, and let's add on a scale. And this is also just like opacity. If you want it to scale by 100%, or if you want it to scale beyond 100%, like 200%, you would add a 2. Or if you wanted it to go down, you would add a 0.2, and it would actually go down here. So let's hit save, and let's preview this here. And so you can see that it's going to scale by 20%, or to 20% of what it was at before. And so you can add scale onto there. You can also add other objects if you wanted to have opacity, or add on objects using jQuery if you wanted to use jQuery inside of there. If you wanted something else to happen, you can actually add an on update or on complete. You can notice here on complete, you can run on a completely separate function. Let's go ahead and try that. I'm going to copy this on complete, and the complete handler, it can be named whatever you want it to name here. So I'm going to go in and exit out of there and come into my JavaScript, and now I'm going to paste in, actually right after my scale, paste in that complete handler, and make sure that I'm going to create a function that says complete handler, and that's where I would create a function complete handler, and it would run whatever is in that function after it is complete. And so that's all you have to do if you wanted to run something afterwards, is just do an on complete command. So a couple other things, let's see, like right here, restart button on click will actually restart. If you do a tween.restart, or whatever the JavaScript is that you put it inside, or whatever the variable is that you put it inside of there, will restart it. A couple other things, the easing, well, the left, we have easing linear. You can have all these other controls like play, pause, resume, timescale, different things. And then if you go into Tween Max, this is where it goes beyond. Like if you wanted to repeat one time, you just add an attribute, repeat one, repeat two, and it will repeat twice. Let's go ahead and hit next here and just go through some of these quickly. If you did this, stagger 2 means that if you have multiple objects, it will actually do one after the other, and the number right after it is how much time in between each object. So if I hit tween here, you'll notice that it was one after the other, that it faded away basically. So we also have rotation. If you wanted to rotate it, you can rotate it by a certain number of degrees. You can rotate it by, you don't even have to add like the degrees there. If you wanted to add rotation, colon, and then 360. Let's go ahead and hit OK and preview this. You can see that it's rotated. It rotated a full 360. You don't have to do a full 360, but it rotated as it went there. And we do that with some of these titles. You can see that things kind of rotate as they bounce in, and that's something that you can do as well with GreenSock. So let's go ahead and continue. And then you can get into the timeline controls. So I'm not going to worry about the timeline controls right now. There is other things like staggers, particles, that you can get into as well, but I just want to make sure that we cover enough. We have rotation Y, rotation X as well. We have top, which will move it from top to bottom, transform, and other items. Now there is a lot more that you can do inside of GreenSock. I do recommend you go to greensock.com. You can add draggable stuff. You can add spinning. Part of that draggable is you can have something spin like a dial or something like that, and allow the user to actually take that and spin it along with it. And so just some of the things that you can do with GreenSock right inside of Lectora.